Hello, my name is Peter Raymer. Today we're going to talk about how to run a D365 job in production with zero downtime. The main reason why you may want to write a runnable class or job and run that job in production is to correct data that you can't fix in production any other way. Most of the time, if there's an issue in production, you want to use the user interface and correct whatever data you need to resolve the issue and then continue forward. But occasionally there's some scenarios where the data really just can't be fixed using the user interface. And if you've determined that's the case, then you'll want to write a runnable class, also called a job, and then promote that to production, and that can change data via X++ code in a way that you couldn't do using the user interface. Until more recently, the only way to move that runnable job to production would be to check in that code like you would any other customizations, then have a build server build a AX all-in-one package of all of your customizations, deploy and apply that package to a stage environment, test it there, then mark that package as a release candidate, and then schedule that package to go into production. That usually would take production down for anywhere from couple to 5 hours, and then you could go to a specific URL in the browser and run that job. So it was very kind of time consuming. It brought your production environment down. Now there's a newer and better way. So let's talk through that. Before we kind of go through it, if you're already planning on promoting code to production, this is still a really good way to check in your code and move the code with your other customizations. However, if you're in a time crunch where you need this data fixed immediately, whether it's causing critical issues, or you're in a place where you don't want to bring your production environment down for the couple hours, this is a great alternative. There are some more steps. There's quite a few steps to actually move this code, so it can be take more steps than the alternative, but because you can do it sooner without any production downtime, it can be a really effective tool. So let's wade in and take a look. So first of all, we need to write a runnable class or job. So I'm actually going to bring up, I wrote an article previously. It's called How to Write a D365 Runnable Class or Job. Feel free to look up that video and this article. This will teach you how to create a project, how to create a class, which really a class and a runnable class is the same thing. A runnable class will have a main method, and then you can compile and check out how that class works. Finally, if you were to promote this job directly to production via package, you can enter in a very specific URL with sysclassrunner to run this job. In this case, though, in this new way, it's a little different. However, you still do need to run or write a runnable class. So this is my runnable class that I wrote. I'm calling it Dynamics 365 Musings Runnable Job 1. And essentially, I am finding a customer that I know exists in the USRT database. I'm then checking to see if the customer group is set to 30. And then if it is, I'm going to change it to 80. Otherwise, if it's anything else, I'm going to change it back to 30, just so I have an example that I could run multiple times. And then I'm calling update. So a pretty kind of useless job. This updating the customer group absolutely can be done using the user interface and should be done that way. But I wanted to provide an example on a record that everyone should have in their demo data. If you've got different data with different customer groups, please check those. Again, normally I shouldn't hard code values like this, but it should be fine for this example. And you can see this code in the article that I've posted. So now that I've got my job, the first step that's a little different than before is I need to store this job in a new separate model. So it shouldn't and can't be in the same model that I'm usually storing things in. So normally I have a model called Dynamics 365 Musings, and all of my customizations are going in there. In this case, I need a distinct, unique model name that hasn't been promoted to production yet. So in order to do that, I actually need to create a new model. I know this is a few new steps and a bunch of steps, but bear with me. It puts together some really good skills. So again, I created an article on how to create a new model. So you can see this one here, how to create a model. Found at this URL. You can watch this video, and we're actually going to go through those few steps right here. One of the things I added is some reference models that you can select when you create your new model. So let's begin. So to create a new model, I'm going to go to Dynamics 365 and then Model Management and then Create Model. At this point, I'm going to give it a name. In this case, I'm going to call it Dynamics 365 Musings Runnable Job 2 because I actually already promoted a model called Job 1. So let's try that. Then I can leave the rest of this. Oops, looks like I need a publisher name. And then my next button will become available. You don't need to change the layer or version number if you don't want to. So then I'll click next. I'm going to create a new package instead of selecting an existing package. I'll click next. And then here is where I need to reference packages. This is a little bit harder to explain, but basically any code that my model might reference, I need to make sure I check the checkboxes where those objects exist. So in this case, I'm only referencing the cus table. I think that might be in one of these, Application Foundation or Application Platform. I guess we could check real quick. But otherwise, if you just want a good thinking about it process, you can look in my other article and we can just go through and kind of select all the ones that are maybe most commonly selected. This can slow down your compile times just a little bit or debug times, but it can be helpful instead of just constantly going back and forth and adding more models if you get compile errors. So I'm just going to go ahead and take a few minutes to check several of these. Again, you may not need all of these, but I'll select a few to give you maybe the most common ones that are going to get selected. So fiscal books, I'll do general ledger, I'll do ledger, personal core, personal management, retail, revenue recognition, source documentation types, subledger, tax engine. Okay, and then unit of measure. So I'm going to say next. The system's going to summarize and show me all the models that I've referenced. I can then create a new project if I want to and make this even my default project for new projects. I want to actually uncheck this, and then I'm just going to say finish. The system's going to go ahead and create this new model for me as well as the new project. Okay, I've got my new project screen. I can call this project whatever I want. I'll call it Dynamics 365 Musings Runnable Job 2, just to give it a very full name. And then I'll say create. Now I've got a new project, and you'll notice in between my square brackets I've got my new model name. If that weren't the case, if I was closed Visual Studio and reopened it and created a new project, I'd want to right click and say properties, and then make sure I select my drop down here and I pick the new model that I've just created that's distinct, that nothing else is in. You can set the synchronized database on build if you needed to. In this case, we're not making any schema changes. That's really important. We're just having some new code, so I'll leave that false and click OK. And then from here, I can add my new runnable class or job and say add new item. I can select D365 items, and then I can go down to runnable class job, and then likewise I can give this a name. I can call it Dynamics 365 Musings Runnable Job 2. I'll name it the same as my project. Now that I've got an empty class with the main, I'm actually going to just copy the code that I showed you before into this main method. Again, this is in the article that I linked with this video, so feel free to just copy and paste it from there. But it looks like this. Pretty straightforward. I think it's important to have an info statement so you can see if this job ran successfully. If it didn't, you definitely want an error message to indicate that something didn't happen, because we'll be able to see these info statements a little later. All right, now go ahead and do a build solution just to make sure that everything compiles right in this new model, in this new class. Okay, now that the build has completed successfully, we can move on to the next step. As a recap, we created a new separate model that we could store our job in, and then we created a new job, we put our code in, and we compiled it. The next step, this is a little different than what we would normally do. Normally you would check in this code, let the build server create an all-in-one package of all your customizations, and then you would use LCS, lifecycle services, to apply that all-in-one package to a new tier 2 environment, whether that be stage and then eventually prod and then run it. Here we're actually not going to check in this code or let the build server build in an all-in-one package. We're going to create a one-off package just with this one piece of code. So the way we do that is we actually go to extensions, then Dynamics 365, and then model management, and then from here, actually, I'm sorry, we need to go to deploy, and then create deployment package. So right here. This will give us a dialog of all of our custom models. I don't have too many in here, and so I want to pick the model that I want to export. So I'm going to create one called Dynamics 365 Musings Runnable Job 2. That's the correct one. Then I need to pick where I want to export this on my computer. It's going to create a direct file. So I'll just create one here. I've already got one called Deployable Packages. Maybe I'll call this one Deployable Packages 2, just to help make it totally unique, on my C drive. And then I'm going to click Create. This is going to run for a little while as it exports my whole model, which includes just this one class in this case, and it creates a file in the directory for us. So I'll come back when it's complete. Okay, the system has finished creating this package. I can now go to my File Explorer and find it. I can go to my C drive, Deploy Packages 2, and I'll see that there's another folder in here called Deployable Package, and then I'm going to see this zip file called AX deployable package with a date in it. I can see that it's pretty small because it's only containing my class and some extra files on top of that. All right, we're moving along. The next few steps are we actually want to upload this package to a tier 2 or production environment, and then we'll be able to approve it and run it. So let me show you how that's done. The form that we need to go to is actually called custom scripts. That's found under system administration, periodic tasks, database, custom scripts. Now, one thing to note is that you're only going to find this form in a tier 2 environment. So far, many of the tutorials that I've shown you just involve a development box. And so if I go into my local front end for this development box and I refresh it, I'm actually going to see that there is no custom scripts menu item in this development box. And that's because it's not considered a tier 2 or higher machine, and so we're not going to be able to apply a custom script this way. If it was in a development box, I would just have the code, I'd compile it, and then I could go to the browser and run it. Same way if you would promote it in any other way. But for this special scenario, we will not have the custom scripts menu item right here in a development box. So instead, I needed to log into a separate tier 2 environment where I can actually see this custom script. And so if I go now in this environment to system administration, periodic tasks, database, you'll see a new menu item called custom scripts. When you click on it, you're going to see this form here. This form allows us to upload, approve the package, and then run the package. So you can see I've got one in here that I did already. Now let's go ahead and do this new package that we've done. But before I do that, there's special permissions that need to be added in order for me to even see this form and to be able to do operations on here. So if I actually go to the options tab like I do on any form in D365, I can click on the security diagnostics button, and it's going to show me the security roles associated with this. So there's actually a duty called approve custom scripts and a duty called maintain custom scripts. And so one of the things that's needed to make this work is we actually need two different D365 users, one that has the approve custom scripts and another separate user that has a maintain custom scripts. The one with the maintain custom scripts is going to be able to upload and run this package, and then the user with the approve custom scripts is going to be able to approve this job. And for since this is such a potential security risk of running X++ code in a tier 2 or production environment, Microsoft has made it so you really have to have two users who have looked at this package, agreed that it should be here before we're able to run it. So in my case, or I should say, you'll notice there's not a role with these two duties. So instead, you'll need to add these duties to an existing role or create a custom role. So in this case, you can click on this add duty to role button and pick a role to add it to. I would say the system administrator role does have everything. So my current user does have the system administrator role assigned to it. You can do that in the users form in D365, then click assign roles and add this system administrator, and then you'll be able to do these operations, and you can do that for two different users. So right now I'm in my first user, and I'm going to click upload, and then I'm going to click browse, and then I'm going to find this new package. So I'm going to go to the deployable packages 2, select my zip file, click open, And then the next thing I need to do is I need to provide a purpose. This is a required field, as you can see by this red outline and star. So I'm going to just write, update customer group on customer. This way it's really clear what we're doing in this case. I'm going to click upload, and the system's going to take that file and upload. Does it really quickly. You can see that it's ready to do through the next step. But if it's not actually possible for me to run this right now, whoops, let's go back actually to this one. Sorry, I'm on the wrong one. The second row, it's uploaded, but it's not actually ready to run. So if I actually click on the details button and then process workflow, it's going to show me my options. And so I can approve, reject, run, etc. But you'll notice the run test and run buttons are grayed out. That's because I have not yet approved this job to be run in production. If I, as the same user, try to approve this, I'm actually going to get an error message saying, hey, you can't approve this script because you're the one who also uploaded it. You must use a separate user. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. I'm going to go into another user and open a new browser for this and pull over that browser into this screen here. Let me resize it a moment. So this is a different user. I can now select this record, click details, click process workflow, and now if I click on the approve button, it'll ask me, are you sure that you want to approve this script? And I can say yes. And what will happen is it will log that I've approved this, and it will update the status to approved. So I can click the back arrow and then click refresh, and I'll see that the status is approved. Now, whether I use this user or more likely your other user that has maintained privileges, we can actually run it. So I'm actually going to go back to my first user, click refresh here so I see it, and now I can run a test run and then run it for real. So let's click details, process workflow. And the next step in this process, we're kind of working our way through each one of these tabs, is I can do a test run. So I'll click on that one. When I do that, the system is going to put a big transaction block around this whole process. It's going to go ahead and run the code, but before it actually commits any changes to the database, it's going to roll all of it back. The reason for that is we don't actually want to save those changes yet, but we do want to log everything that occurred as part of it. So you'll notice we get this really helpful log. It says what SQL was run, what other tables were updated. So in this case, it updated several related records as part of calling update on cust table, and then finished. And so I can see here even my info log that I sent out. This is the info log that I expected. If it was not, if it was an error message, I probably would not want to proceed. I'd want to go back to my Runnable class and change my code and make sure that it was fully correct and re-upload it. But I see that it is correct. That's great. Now, if I go to process workflow, I can see that I've got an option to accept this test log. So basically confirm that it was what I expected. So I'll click accept test log. This says, have you confirmed that the test log meets your expectations and no undesired side effects occurred? It's trying to be very safe about what we're doing. I'll say yes. And then if I go back to process workflow, or you can actually see the status is now ready to run. So I can click process workflow. And now I have the option to go ahead and run it for real and commit those changes. So let's go ahead and try that now. Are you sure you want to run the script? This could cause irreversible changes to your system. In this case, we're going to say yes. There's no other way to fix this problem. We want to do this in our environment. Okay, it ran and it actually fully completed. And we're all set. We can see that this has been set to run completed. If I go back to the process workflow, I've got one more step. I can say purpose was unresolved or purpose resolved, just as an extra step of checking it. So in this case, I might want to go over to another tab. I could go check my all users form and say, okay, let's go to, or all customers, I should say. So if I go to the all customers in the USRT group, I can see that for this account number 004003, the customer group was indeed changed from 30 to 80, and that's expected. So I can go back to this tab, say purpose resolved, click it, and now it's fully completed. I can click the back arrow and refresh button if I want to see that record's now updated. Note, I can't go back in here and just run it again. It can only be run once. If I were to have abandoned this run, that would be locking it down so no other user could run it. It really just can be run once. So it really didn't help that I wrote it in a way in the job that could be toggled back and forth. In order to move this job again to a tier 2 or production environment, I would need to create a brand new model, add that code to that model, export that model as a file, upload it to this custom scripts form again, accept or approve the script, run a test run, and then run it for real. So definitely a lot of steps here as we look at it. But this again can be really helpful. It can be worth the steps if you need to make a change very quickly. This means that your production is not going down for a matter of hours. And while it does take some extra steps for a developer to do, overall the time to getting this data changed in a production environment is much faster than it would be otherwise. Again, I would say if you're already planning on promoting code to production, you can use that older way because it may take fewer steps for a developer. But if you really need this data fix in your environment sooner, or don't have plans to update your production environment anytime soon, this is a really awesome new functionality that Microsoft has added. So thank you so much for watching. Hopefully you learned something new today. I really appreciate you watching. If you liked the video, click the like button. I also invite you to push the subscribe button as well. If there's other topics you would like to see a video on, please post in the comments and I'll see what I can do. I hope you learned something new today. Thank you.